What's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and man, the PC is still under construction. It's actually a little bit worse than we originally thought. That's why it's taking so long, but I promise y'all, as soon as my PC is back up and running, I am immediately getting to work on these film sessions that I promised y'all for the entire rookie class and some of the draft free agents. So just stay patient. I'm still going to try to record as many videos as I can from my phone, but a lot of my video ideas literally like require my PC. Y'all know how I do like the film sessions where I'm at the bottom and then you can see it live while I'm talking about it. So a lot of my ideas and things I want to work on, that's being stopped until the PC is done, but it's not going to completely stop the show. Today, we're coming with an initial 53-man roster projection, really, for the Washington Commanders. I mean, some of it includes what I want to happen, but most of it is what I think will happen. It's me guessing, trying to see how many I can get right. But of course, I got to sprinkle a little bit of Rico from Street Scores in there and what I prefer for them to do. If it's like kind of 50-50, or even if it's 60-40, if I prefer the 40% guy, I'm going to go ahead and go with the 40% guy if it's that close. But the obvious ones, we're going to definitely make sure those are the correct ones. But yeah, so we're doing the initial 2023 53-man roster projection that will go down before we hit week 1 against the Cardinals, which you can see in the thumbnail of this video and all of my thumbnails since I've been counting down since weeks ago. But also, you will also see at the top right how many of that position we had in the initial official 53-man roster that the Commanders actually had last year. Not a projection, not like an analyst breaking it down. The first initial real 53-man roster that the Commanders went into week 1 with last year against the Jaguars. You'll see at the top right how many of each position we had of those at that point in time. So mine are a little different, but it's not just being different just to be different. There are just some things where it's like we don't have to really prioritize this position as much as we did last year because we don't have as many injuries as we had last year. We don't have to hold on to an extra one. We can use that position spot for another position on the team. You'll see when we get there, but before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel with the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification immediately. And every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, again, once the PC is put back together, everything's fixed. It's literally being worked on right now. Once that's back, film sessions, all kinds of videos, man. I know some of y'all probably even miss Brody and Aja in the videos and things like that. All of that will be back once the PC gets back. But I'm gonna have to make do with this iPhone for now. Without further ado, let's get it.
You tell your family you're gonna be a commander.
All right, so for offense, I have 27 total players. Just go ahead and let you know. With defense, I have 23, and then we have 3 special teamers. We can go ahead and get that out the way. Then starting with the quarterbacks, we kept 3 last year. I'm expecting us to keep 3 this year. Of course, you have Sam Howell as your starter. Jacoby Brissett is your obvious second string. Now, the third string is kind of a toss-up right now. Even though Jake Fromm is technically winning, and even just from what I'm hearing so far in early off-season workouts, voluntary OTAs, mini camps, and things like that, I've been hearing way more about Jake Fromm than I've been hearing about Tim Democrat. But and shouts out to all of y'all that helped me learn how to pronounce that. Y'all basically just said it's Democrat without the C, basically. Thank you for that. But either way, I'm really hoping, I'm rooting for Tim, the guy that played at Fordham University in the Bronx, very low level of competition, basically the Bailey Zapp of this draft class, but he went undrafted. And so I'm really rooting for that guy because as a Georgia fan, I can tell you, Jake Fromm is not the one you want in the game. Remember, the NFL just put up a rule today, just enacted a rule, voted on it and everything. It's passed just this offseason, just a couple of weeks ago. This is going to be our first season doing this, I believe, in NFL history, that you can have 3 active quarterbacks, and that quarterback doesn't even necessarily take up like an active day roster, because you know how you have the 53-man roster, and then you have a little less than that can actually be active for any given game during the game. And I believe they made it to where a third quarterback doesn't count. I believe that's how that works. I don't remember and exactly know the exact details. But either way, we're going to have 3 quarterbacks available every game, at the very least this upcoming season, and maybe the rule sticks. And then just for the remainder of the history of the NFL ever, we'll just always have 3 quarterbacks active. So I'm hoping that, you know, with Jake Fromm, Georgia Bulldog, I mean, I appreciate everything he did for us, but NFL-wise, I mean, out here making Bobby McCain look like an all-pro safety. I just feel like that tells you everything you need to know. Even though I've been hearing good things about him so far in the offseason, I'm not going to hate on him. If I hear good things, I'm going to admit I've heard good things. Sounds like he's doing good things out there so far. But at the same time, man, I'm rooting for Tim Demerat because the ceiling is definitely higher than a Jake Fromm. And I really hope that by the time we get to this initial 53-man roster, he's proven enough. He's going to get plenty of time and opportunities in the preseason and training camp and stuff like that. So, you know, I hope he goes out there and earns it. But I would not be surprised if Jake Fromm ends up winning it because, again, I've been hearing way more about Jake Fromm than my boy Tim Demerat. But we'll see, man. And, of course, I'm one of those people that's very high on Sam Howell. I'm very high on him. I think he's going to lead us to the playoffs. I think if he balls out as much as I hope he does, not necessarily what I think he will, but as much as I hope he does, we can truly be a real Super Bowl contender this year. I believe that's fairly realistic, more realistic than it's been as far as Commanders, Washington football team, and Redskins have gone since like the past few years. Sam Howell is definitely the brightest spot we have. Again, like I'm going to keep saying it, Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke, we were winning in spite of those guys a lot of those games last year. They were in the 30s. There's only 32 teams in the NFL. They were in the 30s, like 35, 37th, and stuff like that in a lot of QB metrics. They were literally worse than other teams' backups. We were winning in spite of those guys. Sam Howell, I feel like at the very least, shouldn't be as bad as those guys. We'll see how good he is, but I know for a fact he won't be that bad. So just off of Eric Bieniemy being the offensive coordinator, revamped offensive line, and Sam Howell becoming our quarterback, we're just better than we were last year, just period. And hopefully John Dotson can stay healthy, and we're just going to be better just simply because of that as well. I think Sam Howell's going to lead the charge. And the Jacoby Brissett, man, if anything, he is fourth in inches QB sneak god. You can argue he's the best QB sneak quarterback in the NFL. You can also argue he's the best backup quarterback in the NFL, even though I saw an article recently that had him fourth, but I think he's first. I honestly do think that. But we'll see, man. And the fact that Sam Howell is looking as good as he's only played one game in his NFL career so far. And the fact that that guy is still outplaying and outperforming, or at the very least doing just enough so far in offseason workouts to keep the best backup quarterback in the NFL from taking the starting spot from him, shows that Sam Howell is definitely progressing, and we should be very optimistic about him. I mean, speaking of QB metrics and stuff like that, Jacoby Brissett wasn't as bad as Taylor Heineke and Carson Wentz were last year. So just to give you a clear view of what's going on right now, Jacoby Brissett last year, I'm not going to necessarily say in general, even though if we had to say last year and moving forward, even going into 2023 and things like that, I prefer Jacoby Brissett over Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke. But just last year, period, if you look at all of the statistics and even just look at the tape, Jacoby Brissett was a better quarterback than Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke. And right now, so far, Sam Howell looks like the better quarterback than him. So that's why we should be optimistic about this QB room. I didn't expect to talk about QB that long, but hey, man, I'm really excited about Sam Howell. I'm not going to lie. Now, moving on to running backs, I have us having 4, and the Commanders last year kept 4 in the initial 2022 real 53-man roster. Not any projections, like the real one. I'm going to keep emphasizing that. I have us keeping Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson, Jared Patterson, and Chris Rodriguez. The interesting one here is the Jared Patterson. Even though we drafted Chris Rodriguez in the 6th round and he started a little slow in voluntary OTAs, from everything that I'm hearing recently, they really like him. He's progressed a lot. And Eric Bieniemy, that's pretty much an Eric Bieniemy pick. Eric Bieniemy, and off of what he did with Isaiah Pacheco and guys like that for the Chiefs, you just kind of got to give Eric Bieniemy the benefit of the doubt when it comes to late round guys that carry the ball at the very least, even if you just want to be that petty and specific. At the very least, late round draft picks that run with the ball in their hand, Eric Bieniemy knows what he's doing. So if he identified Chris Rodriguez as one of those potential guys, then I believe him. But they basically see him as like another guy that can tote the rock like a Brian Robinson, is going to eat a lot of the carries, where Antonio Gibson is going to be more of the pass catching back. But don't sleep, because Brian Robinson's out here making one-hand catches in off-season practices, and if Brian Robinson can contribute in the passing game, that's going to keep defenses balanced, because we don't want it to be where Brian Robinson's in the game, teams know we're more than likely running the ball, and then they stack the box. No, Brian Robinson can be a true pass-catching threat. I'm not expecting him to go out there and be Antonio Gibson or J.D. McKissick level, but if at the very least he has sure hands and he can contribute in the passing game, and especially as a pass protector, him being on the field doesn't automatically signal, oh, the Commanders are definitely running the ball, and more than likely in between the tackles. If he can go out there and keep defenses balanced, it's going to help him do what he wants to do best more effectively and easier. And that's running between the tackles. He doesn't prefer to catch the ball. He prefers to run the ball in between the tackles, but you have to have the threat of other things to make what you truly want to do easy. So teams don't focus on stopping that specifically. And again, I've been saying it for several videos and live streams. I think Antonio Gibson this is his year. He's on a contract year. So a mix of that. And also I just think Eric Bieniemy was the perfect offensive coordinator to get the most out of him. We've been saying it for a couple of years now. This is Antonio Gibson's year, but I think this is truly his year. Even just, if you just want to go off of concrete evidence and not just what I hope happens, so far in off-season workouts, he's been looking like one of them ones. Like, if you had to pick a guy in fantasy to pick from the Commanders, even though it's going to be really difficult because we have a lot of mouths to feed, I already did an entire breakdown of that and why it's going to be difficult to select anybody from the Commanders in fantasy, which is a great thing for our for the fan base and our offensive coordinator, because there's so many threats. The defense won't be able to game plan for any one particular person. Really not even three. You got to worry about like 7 or 8, which is great as a fan, terrible for fantasy. But that doesn't really matter. Either way, Antonio Gibson, if you had to pick one guy for fantasy, it's probably him. So we'll see. But Curtis Samuel may be one of those guys as well. But I'm really excited about Antonio Gibson's potential this season. Also, Jared Patterson already did like a full breakdown of this a few videos ago. But basically, he's like a secret weapon. His height, defenses do not practice against that in the offseason. Every team doesn't have just this super short bowling ball that they can simulate, you know, trying to learn how to find them behind all of the rubble and all of the tall offensive linemen and defensive linemen trying to get to him and things like that. You lose track of a Jared Patterson. And if you're a defense that doesn't have to practice against that consistently in the offseason, when you have to face it in a game, it catches you off guard. You lose track of him. You just haven't had the mental and physical reps of trying to locate this guy. And he's a real good one cut and I'm out guy with good vision and things like that. So when the linebackers and DBs can't see him and then he finds that one hole and makes the cut immediately, that's why it seems like every time Jared Patterson comes into a game, defenses don't look ready and he's always busting off yards a little bit more than you expect because defenses just don't practice against that. That's why I believe we still currently have a fullback right now who's clearly not going to make the 53-man roster. My boy Alex Armah came from the Carolina Panthers. He's from Atlanta, so I'm always rooting for him, but he's clearly not going to make the 53-man roster at all. He may not even make it to the practice squad. I hope he does for this exact reason, that you need a fullback so that you can simulate it for the defense so that when you finally go against a fullback like a Kyle Juszczyk, Alex Armah is not Kyle Juszczyk, but at the very least you have a guy that has that sort of play style and that type of build, that type of role. Your defense is able to practice against that all off season. So by the time you go against a fullback in a regular season game or potentially the playoffs, it's not just like your first time experiencing that all season. You're not just completely caught off guard. You've been practicing against it at the very least the months of July and August. So I think Jared Patterson is kind of like that same similar secret weapon. He has a really important niche that not many teams in the NFL have. Really only like a handful. So, man, I think he should make the roster. The Commanders kept Jonathan Williams over Jared Patterson last year, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did it again this year. But again, like I said in the intro, sometimes I'm just going to overrule what the Commanders seem like they will do just based off of what I want them to do. Sometimes I'm going to throw in what I want more so than what I actually predict will happen. If I have to put money on it, I think Jonathan Williams makes the 53-man roster. But I'm going to keep throwing Jared Patterson's name up there until I can't. I'm sorry. I'm just one of those guys that is a fan of Jared Patterson. And then wide receivers, 6 of them. And then they kept 6 on the initial 53-man roster going into the 2022 regular season last year. Of course, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, De'Ami Brown, Dax Milne. Those are obvious. Dax Milne, until Kazmir Allen gets back healthy enough from his hamstring issue to show that he can really take over that starting punt return spot, which I'm rooting for. Dax Milne is the safe option. I call him automatic fair catch. He doesn't drop a pass, but at the same time, he gives you no real return or explosion in the punt return game. No real potential as far as changing field positions and things like that. But he's safe. But as of right now, he's our starting punt returner. And then on top of that, he's making plays as a receiver in practice. Like, he has a lot of people are saying he has some of the best catches we've seen so far this entire offseason, even including Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, De'Ami Brown, all of these guys. So it's just going to be hard for him to get dethroned enough to not make the roster. But even just specifically punt return wise, Kazmir Allen is our best hope to potentially overtake a Dax Milne. But I got to see it to believe it. I mean, you see it in his UCLA tape, but then he tested very poorly. And then now he's dealing with a hamstring issue. And that may be why he tested so poorly in the first place with his 40 time and all of that, to where some people don't think he's that explosive. If you look at the tape, Casimir Allen is way better of an athlete than his testing shows from his like pro day and things like that. But either way, Dax Milne is on this roster. Just go ahead and stamp that in. You can go ahead and put money on that. Those 5 that I've already listed, you can put money on that. Marcus Kemp, I think, makes it because he's a strong special teams contributor. And he's kind of like a Cam Sims replacement, kind of like as far as height goes. I think Cam Sims is definitely the better receiver. And I think Cam Sims is definitely the better punt blocking specialist. Like punt, like when you're defending against the punt, you're the one going down trying to make the tackle. If you need somebody to go play gunner, be the first one down there to get the punt returner and stuff, and the kickoff returner and things like that, then I believe in Cam Sims. But Marcus Kemp is the better blocker in special teams. So like in that Chiefs Super Bowl against the Eagles, man, Marcus Kemp had some really key blocks that allowed them to change field position. So they're 2 completely different guys when it comes to special teams, Marcus Kemp and Cam Sims I'm talking about. But as far as receivers go, they're pretty much the same thing. I would just side more with Cam Sims. But the fact that Cam Sims isn't here and they have Marcus Kemp shows that they're that high on Marcus Kemp. He's more than likely making the team. It's not like I'm necessarily a big Marcus Kemp fan, but just reading the clues right now, he's going to make the team, point blank period. In this receiving group, like I've been saying, receivers, defensive line, and I'm telling you the dark horse is the secondary, the 3 best position groups on this team. You never know. If Sam Howell goes out there and balls out enough, you may be able to throw quarterback in there. But as of right now, from what I've seen so far, to what I could truly believe in, not hope for, but truly believe in with at least semi-concrete evidence, the wide receiver group, the defensive line, and the secondary group, I'm telling you, we will have debates amongst this fan base which one is the best position group. And speaking of the receiving group, man, I think it's the most underrated in the NFL. And I think they honestly have top 5 receiving group in the NFL potential. I think they can easily compete with that of the Cincinnati Bengals with all those receivers that they got. Everybody loves them, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and all of those guys. I think we can compete, man, especially if De'Ami Brown as the 4th receiver can step up big time with his ex-college teammate and Sam Howell, and they have that chemistry going. I'm telling you, man, this receiving group can be ridiculous. Moving on. Now, this is the first time I have a different number than what the Commanders went into the 2022 regular season with. They went into the regular season with 5 tight ends. I only have us keeping 4. Like I foreshadowed earlier in the video, we only kept 5 last year because Logan Thomas was recovering from an injury and we weren't even sure if he was going to be able to play. And then when he was out there, he was not himself until like the very end of the season, like the last couple of games. Cole Turner was dealing with this ridiculous hamstring issue that took way too long to recover from. Armani Rogers was still extremely raw. He's still raw now, but he was even more raw back then than he was this time around before he just got hurt out for season. And I can't wait for him to come back. Y'all know how I feel about Armani Rogers, Darren Waller potential. And then Curtis Hodges even had a slight injury to where we were able to just throw him away on IR. But again, I've said it several times, we were just playing chess, not checkers with that one, because Curtis Hodges had basically got a boo-boo and they were like, just basically play dead. Play as if you just can't play football again this year so that we can stow you away on the IR and we don't have to basically do what the Cowboys tried to do with John Ridgeway and then you end up getting taken by another team, basically. The Cowboys tried to sneak John Ridgeway onto the practice squad and it didn't work out. And we ended up with him. We're going to talk about him later in this 53-man roster projection video because he's definitely making the 53-man roster. That is a really good player and a steal that we got out of absolutely nowhere for absolutely no reason, no price at all. It's crazy that the Cowboys got finessed like that. I'm really happy about that still. But either way, Curtis Hodges, instead of going through that, we were like, nah, I know you got a little scratch, like a little tiny little scratch, but just play dead. Just play like it's the worst scratch you have had in your life so that we can keep you on IR and then we're going to feature you next year. And then with Armani Rogers getting hurt, especially now, Curtis Hodges is your 4th tight end. And I only see us keeping 4 tight ends. I think we would have only kept 4 tight ends last year if we just didn't have so many injuries. And as of right now, our tight end room is pretty much 100% healthy, again, excluding Armani Rogers out of the picture because we're not going to see him until 2024. So we're only going to keep 4 of that. So that allows us to keep 1 more of a different position, which is going to be offensive tackle. You'll see when we get there. Now, next up, interior offensive line. We kept 6 last year. I predict us keeping 6 this year. Of course, you have Nick Gates, Ricky Stromberg, and Tyler Larsen as your centers. You have Sadiq Charles, Chris Paul, and Samuel Cosme as your guards. Right now, Samuel Cosme is your starting right guard. And as of right now, that's the only, like, severely concrete thing right now. Because technically, Tyler Larsen is your backup center. You have Sadiq Charles and Chris Paul competing for left guard, but don't sleep on Nick Gates there. for the exact reason that Nick Gates right now is our starting center. Like, if we had to play a game tomorrow, he's our starting center. But at the same time, Ricky Stromberg started off-season workouts as our third-string center. He already surpassed Tyler Larsen to take over the second-string center spot on the depth chart. And then you never know. Maybe by the time we get to this initial 53-man roster, the real one, before we head into that Week 1 game against the Cardinals, maybe Ricky Stromberg develops enough and shows enough in those preseason games and practices to where they trust him to start at center for us Week 1. And then at that point, Nick Gates probably could just go move to a backup spot, kind of like a Wes Schweitzer again. But Wes Schweitzer is more of a guard. Nick Gates is more of a center. But both of those guys are basically interior offensive line backup. So if there's an injury or if you need somebody to start in a pinch, Nick Gates can be that guy at either guard or center if you need him to. But at the same time, Ricky Stromberg takes over at center. And if Sadiq Charles, as of right now, who's our starting left guard, or Chris Paul steps up enough, Nick Gates will become a backup. But don't be surprised if Ricky Stromberg somehow becomes good enough to start at center and Nick Gates becomes your starting guard because they just trust him a little bit more than Sadiq Charles with Chris Paul. But of course, you hope that the guys with the more athleticism, the younger guys with the higher ceilings, are the guys that end up starting, because that shows that they just develop well enough to surpass the guy that we already know where Nick Gates is. We know he's good. But right now, Sadiq Charles and Chris Paul down here, if they're starting, that means they went here. It's not like they're here and Nick Gates got worse. No, Nick Gates is going to be here, and ultimately you just hope that Sadiq Charles and Chris Paul get good, play well enough to where they can start over them, because that just means we're a better team overall just by those standards. So yeah, man, I have us keeping 6 interior offensive linemen like we did last year, and those are the 6. 3 centers, with one of them as a Nick Gates also being a backup guard. Then you have Samuel Cosme, Chris Paul, and Sadiq Charles, 3 guards. And then with us not taking and keeping 5 tight ends, only keeping 4. I had an extra roster spot. I spent it on offensive tackle. We only kept 3 last year going into the 2022 regular season. I have us keeping 4 this year because Andrew Wiley and Charles Leno are your starting right and left tackles. Cornelius Lucas is your backup swing tackle. And Braden Daniels is like literally unplayable right now. Like literally, we had to play a game right now and Braden Daniels had to start. You can go ahead and chalk it up for Sam Howell getting sacked. It looking like the first Eagles game with Carson Wentz. Double-digit sacks type of thing. Literally unplayable. But I'm a big fan of Braden Daniels. I see the elite potential where he just has the footwork that he has. Well, more so foot athleticism, foot quickness, foot smoothness, not work. He still needs the technique, but if we're talking about just natural God-given ability, you can't teach what Braden Daniels has. And that's why they see him as a potential star left tackle, which is basically it. He's either going to be boom or bust. You're either going to develop him into an elite star level, like Pro Bowl level left tackle, or he's going to just be a terrible tackle or going to have to move the guard because of his lack of arm length and things like that. There's really no in between with the type of like physical tools that he has. Either he figures it out or he doesn't. There's literally no middle. And so with that experiment that they're working on, and they're very high on Braden Daniels, they're even higher on him than I am, and they really believe in him, and I don't see them, even though he's pretty unplayable right now, I don't see them cutting him and putting him on the practice squad. I think they still want him available when in doubt. So we'll see, man. I'm excited about his future, but as of right now, we only have 3 playable offensive tackles, but I have us keeping 4 for the initial 53-man roster, especially if we're able to hold on to a roster spot from the tight end group instead of keeping 5, keeping 4. And then, like I said earlier, defense, I have us keeping 23 total players, starting with the interior defensive line. We kept 4 going into week 1 in the 2022 season. I have us keeping 4 this time around as well. That's Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Phidarian Mathis, and John Ridgeway. I'm telling you, Phidarian Mathis, as good as John Ridgeway was last year, I think Phidarian Mathis is going to be even better. So it's almost as if Phidarian Mathis is part of this rookie class, along with Emmanuel Forbes, Quan Martin, and stuff like that, because we didn't get to see him much at all last year. So it's going to be really fun for him to kind of come out of nowhere this upcoming season. Hopefully a lot of other teams, especially teams in the NFC East, potentially forgot about how good he was at Alabama and how good he looked for us, even in the preseason before he got hurt and stuff like that. So I'm really excited about Phidarian Mathis holding down that middle. Him and John Ridgeway, their primary roles, their niche is that they're double team eaters. Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen are guys that have pass rush potential. You want them to go after the quarterback. Phidarian Mathis and John Ridgeway, on the other hand, can be basically pure nose tackles if you want them to, but also trust them to be 3-tech defensive tackles, which is huge. If you could be both nose tackle and 3-tech defensive tackles, that allows us to hold on to those roster spots and use them, allocate them to other position groups on the team, which is really important when you start to narrow down the roster from 90 to 53. But either way, Phidarian Mathis and John Ridgeway, their primary roles right now are to be dominant double teams, run stuff in nose tackles. They eat up the guard on one side and the center, and that allows Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne to basically get one-on-one blocks across the board, and somebody through that is gonna beat their guy. There's no way you're able to single block all of those guys and somebody doesn't get through. So that's basically just opening up the floodgates with the Phidarian Mathis and John Ridgeway, that niche, that secret weapon on defense, you know, that random nose tackle you throw out there every now and then. But at the same time, they're not just pure nose tackles. I can see Phidarian Mathis going out there when Jonathan Allen or Deron Payne needs a breather. He can go out there and play 3-tech for us with only 4 defensive linemen out there. So I'm really high on Phidarian Mathis. I'm really excited about him as well. But only have us keeping 4. It sucks. We have a lot of really good depth on the defensive line. It sucks that, you know, we'll probably only keep 4 defensive tackles, interior defensive linemen like we did last year. Because honestly, they're like 5 or 6 guys that other teams would love to have that we had. Like the guys that are not making it, other teams would gladly take them on their roster. So I hope we don't lose them, but we probably will. Just that's what happens. That's a good problem to have when you have so much talent in one position group. And then edge rusher, I have us keeping 5, just like we did entering the 2022 regular season. Of course, Chase Young and Montez Sweat are your starters. James Smith-Williams is obviously going to make the team because when Chase Young was hurt the majority of last year, all the way up to the last 3 games, James Smith-Williams was just starting defensive end, and he did a pretty good job. He's not a great pass rusher, but he holds the edge, and that's like really the main priority that they want out of those guys, if anything. I mean, rushing the passer, getting sacks, pressures, and things like that are basically an additional benefit. But I think the primary role of these 5-tech defensive ends that we have, more so than like outside linebackers, they prefer for them to be dominant edge setters. And that's, if anything, Chase Young and Montez Sweat are both dominant edge setters. We forget how good they are against the run because we complain so much about how they don't produce as far as rushing the passer. Do not forget the fact that those 2 are dominant edge setters. And James Smith-Williams is really good as well. He may not be dominant or elite like Chase Young and Montez Sweat. You could easily argue Chase Young and Montez Sweat are the most dominant edge-setting duo in the NFL already, even as young as they are. You just want them to become better pass rushers. But don't sleep on James Smith-Williams because he's really good and can start on other defensive lines as well. So he's going to make the team. KJ Henry, I'm really high on him. I think he was still in the draft where we got him. He should have gone a couple of rounds sooner. Remember, he led Clemson in pressures last year. Out of all of those guys, Miles Murphy, Brian Brzee, all of those guys, KJ Henry is the one that led the team in pressures. And remember, he was a 5-star recruit, like top 10 player coming out of high school. He just never really reached his potential in college. And I think, honestly, I mean, if he would have went to Georgia, we would have got it out of him. He would have been another 1st-round pick. But, you know, he chose to go to Clemson. Hey, man, I can't speak on it. That's on him, you know. But at the very least, he can live with that. Now going to the Commanders, we can get it out of them. With Jeff Ganina and Ryan Kerrigan and Warren Sapp, they're going to get it out of them. I think they can tap into that 5-star recruit potential. And I think, honestly, by the time we get to week 1, maybe not as of today, but I think by the time we get to week 1, KJ Henry is our best defensive end, not named Chase Young or Montez Sweat. I think he'll even surpass James Smith-Williams at that point. And then Casey Toohill, I'm more excited about F.A. Obata's potential, but I can definitely see it to where the Commanders keep a Casey Toohill over an F.A. Obata. If it were me personally, I would prefer F.A. Obata, but this time I went with where I feel like the Commanders feel right now as far as a prediction. But again, if it were up to me, F.A. Obata would get that 5th spot in the edge rusher group. And this is a really dominant group. The problem is, KJ Henry, out of all the faces you're looking at right now, KJ Henry is the only one who's on contract beyond this 2023 season. After this 2023 regular season ends, well, postseason, hopefully, if we go to the postseason and win some games, you know, win a Super Bowl, you know what I'm saying? Speaking into existence. But either way, as soon as this 2023 season ends, KJ Henry, out of all of these faces you see on here, is the only one that is on the Commanders roster. We have to re-sign all of these guys. Even some of the other guys, like F.A. Obata, who I want to make the team, you don't even see them on here. None of those guys are on roster going into the 2024 season, sadly. So just remember that. Now, moving on. Linebacker, I have us keeping 4. We kept 5 going into the 2022 regular season last year. I don't really see it. I mean, it's mostly just because, like, who's the 5th? And then also, there's so many DBs that I love that I just don't see any of those linebackers worth it to keep over one of those DBs that I really like. We'll get there next. But, I mean, Deshaun Harris, Milo Eifler, I'm a big fan of Farrah Gardner because he's from Atlanta. I'm biased, and he just, you know, did pretty well at the XFL for the DC Defenders last year. But I just don't really see it. I mean, I'm even looking at David Mayo a little sideways. He's a certified run stopper, but such a liability in coverage that if the team is passing the ball and David Mayo's on the field, it's pretty much 10 versus 11. It's that bad. And then Cody Barton is progressing. Khaleke Hudson is surprising a lot of people. Both of those guys look better than people expected. Then Jamin Davis is your linebacker 1. Again, like I've already explained in several videos with advanced stats and stuff like that. Long story short, we're more likely to go out there with 1 linebacker than 3. So with that logic, where most of the time it's only going to be 2 on the field, like the vast majority of the time, technically you only need 4 linebackers because you have 2 starters and another guy that can be like brought into the rotation any given game. And then you have the technical backup, the 4th guy. So maybe they keep 5 like they did last year, but I just don't see who you would throw in there unless somebody surprises us. We just have so many great DBs. I don't know who I would take off the DB room to add another linebacker in there. And then what linebacker would I add? I don't really see it. So, first of all, again, just to explain, don't panic about this linebacker group. I'm telling you, we only go out there with 1 quite a bit of the time, more than you think. And then we're out there with 2 the vast majority of the time. You're more likely to see us out there with 1 linebacker, just Jamin Davis alone by himself, than you are to see 3 of them out there at the same time. Really, like literally. So, man, the linebacker group is straight. Don't worry about the talent. I mean, maybe a random free agent gets cut or something, we can bring in a guy that can upgrade the linebacker position. But right now, I'm comfortable with us just going in with those 4. And then the cornerback group, we kept 4 last year. I have us keeping 5. And I'm just a big fan of Tariq Castro-Field's potential, man. I mean, that 4.3 something speed, loads of potential, super high ceiling, flashed quite a bit last year. The overall like resume last year wasn't great. The overall production and play wasn't great, but you saw flashes to where like, hey man, we could develop this into a future like really good slot corner, versatile, another DB piece that can just play everywhere. And we'll talk about it when we get to the safeties, but I see Quan Martin more as a slot corner than anything else. But he's also going to double up as a safety as well. So it just really depends. But I just kind of wanted to make it even. I preferred to see 5 corners and 5 safeties rather than 6 corners and 4 safeties. That's really the only reason I did that. It's nothing deeper than that. And then plus the Commanders may actually have him as a safety on the depth chart. So far they have, from what I've just heard and things like that. He's played more safety in practice from reports I've gotten than he's played corner, but I think ultimately he's our starting corner. So Emmanuel Forbes, Kendall Fuller, Benjamin St-Juste, all outside corners in my opinion. I mean, Benjamin St-Juste, you can argue, can play a little bit in the slot, but you prefer him outside. Kendall Fuller, terrible in the slot, great in the outside. Emmanuel Forbes, you way more prefer him in the outside, and you don't draft a slot corner 16th overall in the first round. So Emmanuel Forbes, and they've already said it too, Emmanuel Forbes is literally an outside corner. They're only playing him in the slot so far in off-season practices so that he can learn to see the field from every angle, and it's more difficult to play in the slot depending on what's going on because you don't have the out of bounds and the boundary to kind of be an additional defender with you. You're on an island in the slot. The guy can go left or right. So they want him to get that experience, but he's an outside corner. Him, Kendall Fuller are pure outside corners. That's it. Benjamin St-Juste is a way better outside corner than he is slot corner. So you don't even want him playing slot corner. So as of right now, I have Quan Martin as our projected as our starting slot corner, but Danny Johnson, man, he looks terrible for some odd reason September through October. But when we start trying to make that playoff run, Danny Johnson goes from a 65 overall to like an 82 overall slot corner. It's so weird. He goes from in the preseason can't even cover 4th string Ravens receivers, and the Ravens wide receiver group was bad last year. And then for some reason, as we get into November and December, he's locked up in slot corner. I really don't get it. He's done it like 2 or 3 years now. So I just don't sleep on Danny Johnson making the roster, no matter how bad he looks in training camp or preseason, because it just seems like for some reason in November or December, I don't know if it's just like a certain moon that comes out and he howls to it at night. I don't know if he has to sacrifice a goat. I don't know what happens in November. I don't know if it's like a certain temperature, like he's only good at 73 degrees or lower. I mean, I'm just trying to think of all of the potential reasons. Like, is there a certain fruit that only grows in autumn that he can eat that makes him? I have no idea. I'm joking, but it's like really crazy how consistent it's been. If it happened 1 year, then I'd be like, okay, maybe he just got better and improved. But it's been like back to back to back. But either way, Danny Johnson is your break glass in case of emergency starting slot corner if you need one. If Quan Martin's hurt or whatever, it doesn't look as good as we expected. And also, don't forget Danny Johnson is a pretty decent returner if we have to make him a returner, Dax Milne were to get hurt or whatever. So Danny Johnson just always has a spot on this team because he just plays too many roles. He fits too many hats. And then Tariq Castro-Fields, again, I just love his potential, so I'm really excited about him, and I think he should make the roster. It's not even necessarily me predicting him to make the roster, because if I had to predict, I think, honestly, they probably would keep an extra linebacker and then not keep Tariq Castro-Fields, put him on the practice squad. Because we already, I think we claimed him off waivers and things like that. So it's not like you're really fighting other teams to keep him. You could probably cut him and try to bring him onto your practice squad and know the team will really notice and try to snatch him away from you. But this is just more so what I hope happens. I'm hoping by the time we get to the initial 53-man roster in late August that he's good enough to make the 53-man roster. It's more so a hope. Like, Jared Patterson is just straight up, I think he's better, and we need to keep him. Tariq Castro-Fields is more so, man, please don't make me look stupid. I'm just banking on your potential and you realizing it and going out there and balling out in training camp and preseason and stuff like that. So, hey, this is like the least confident out of every pick I've shown you so far, and that you're going to see this entire video. Out of all 53 players, Tariq Castro-Fields is the one I'm the least confident in by far, not even close. Jared Patterson is like a distant second. And then going to the safeties, we kept 5 last year. I have us keeping 5 this upcoming season. Cameron Curl, Darrick Forrest, you're starting strong. And free safeties, I think they're going to be an elite group. I think people around the NFL, not just Commanders fans, are going to finally recognize this safety group, this secondary period, as a top 10, even maybe even top 5 secondary. And I think Cameron Curl and Darrick Forrest can be an elite safety duo. Pro Football Focus-wise, they were both top 5 safeties in the NFL. Like, literally out of all safeties in the NFL, Cameron Curl was like 2 and Darrick Forrest was like 4, like halfway through the season or something like that. So it was crazy. Like, those guys are like really good when everything's working. When the defensive line is healthy, when they're getting pressure, Jack Del Rio scheming everybody up, Cameron Curl's healthy. That safety duo can literally be elite. Like, I'm not exaggerating, I'm telling you. And Cameron Curl, I mean, I think he's going to be healthier this season just because the Commanders are doing everything in their power. Ron Rivera's even said it like out loud in a press conference. They want him to play pure strong safety. I mean, maybe he'll move into Buffalo nickel a little bit. Maybe he'll play a tiny bit of free safety. Maybe he'll play in the box a tiny bit. But they ultimately just want him in coverage as a pure strong free safety because they want him to stay healthy. They don't want him doing too much against the run, getting hurt like he did last year. And when Cameron Curl wasn't out there, our defense was like the worst doing it. I mean, our defense was worse without Cameron Curl than without like a Jonathan Allen or Deron Payne. It just made it clear that Cameron Curl is a more integral part to this defense being successful than even Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne. Am I saying that he's a better safety than Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne are defensive linemen? No. But it was clear that Jonathan Allen being hurt, oh, we can work around that. Our defense isn't going to be as good, but it's not night and day like when Cameron Curl was out there versus when he wasn't. It's just ridiculous, dog. And so Quan Martin, again, I more so see him as a slot corner, but you can play him as strong safety, free safety, even outside corner. This man can literally play every position in the secondary. That's why when a lot of people say that he was a reach at the second round, I don't really see it, man. I think he's going to prove a lot of people wrong, man. This guy is versatile. He's extremely explosive. You can't teach the explosion that he has. I think he has the highest vertical, or one of the highest, like one of the top 5 highest verticals of a cornerback since RES has been doing their thing since the 1987, since they've been tracking it. He has the highest vertical, I believe, out of any corner that's touched the NFL, or one of the highest, top 5, top 10 highest. Extremely explosive, and then really fast, all of that, man. Pure athlete, really smart, versatile guy. I mean, if you're talking position flex, even though I'm starting to hate the word, because again, my logic is I prefer a guy that's elite at 1 or 2 things rather than decent or good at like 5 things. So the positional flex thing does get on my nerves, but Jatavius Quan Martin is one of those guys that, like, hey, man, that's true positional flex. He may actually be elite at a couple of those things, most notably slot corner. Percy Butler, my dog, man, I'm really rooting for him. The athleticism, the potential is ridiculous. Just picture a Tariq Castro-Fields, but a little bit more polished. And a little bit more productive, a little bit more ready to go right now. I love his potential, and so far I've been hearing absolutely nothing but great things from him so far this offseason. So it sounds like, just like Khaleke Hudson, just like Chris Paul at guard last year, just like Sam Howell at quarterback, that Cowboys game, man, Percy Butler, all of those guys just had that one game where it seemed like everything clicked. They finally got their opportunity against the Cowboys. They made the most of it, and it seems like that momentum carried into the next season. It's not like Khaleke Hudson just had one flash in the pan, and then that was it. No, that carried into this offseason. He looks like linebacker 1, even with Jamin Davis back healthy. That's how good people say he is. But of course, Jamin Davis is linebacker 1. But right now, Jack Del Rio basically said we don't even necessarily miss a Jamin Davis. Getting them back is going to be extra help. But it's not like we're out there like, man, we sure miss Jamin Davis right now. We don't have nothing else. Why, he's hurt. No, Khaleke Hudson stepped up big time. Sam Howell's progressed. Percy Butler, again, another one that it wasn't just a flash in the pan against the Cowboys where he finally looked like he figured something out. It's continued into this offseason. So that shows that that is truly who those guys are. This was not just a random fluke. These guys are what you saw against the Cowboys. If anything, they've only gotten better this offseason. So, and then Jeremy Reeves, I mean, come on now. All-Pro Revo, the only All-Pro player we had last year. We had guys that got All-Pro votes, but Jeremy Reeves was the only certified All-Pro that we had last year. As a special teamer, of course, but also even as a safety, man, I've been hearing great things about him. And now, granted, he's probably last on the depth chart. Like, if there were injuries, Percy Butler would probably start before Jeremy Reeves. Quan Martin would probably start before Jeremy Reeves and stuff like that. But either way, he's a great guy to have his depth. If he's your fifth safety, your safety group is really good, because we saw him even as a starter looking pretty good for us a couple of years ago. So for him to be your fifth safety that's barely making the roster, mostly because of his special teams contribution and ability, your safety group is really good and really deep. I'm telling y'all, wide receiver group, defensive line, secondary. Don't be surprised if this secondary is the best group. Pro Football Focus, when they did their power rankings a couple of weeks ago, they said our strongest group will be our secondary. Don't be sleep, man. Don't sleep. I'm telling you, man. And then, of course, lastly, our three specialists. You have Joey Sly as your kicker, and then Tress Way as your punter, and Cameron Cheeseman as your long snapper. That's basically it right there. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. Of course, man, just stay tuned, stay patient with me until I get my PC back and repaired and everything. It's a lot going on. I'm having to pay for all kinds of stuff too. So, man, I really appreciate all the support, especially the sponsors that you see scrolling on the screen right now, because y'all are helping me even basically get this PC repaired. All of the support y'all show with the donations, watching the videos, leaving likes, all of that type of stuff is really helping me out right now. I really appreciate it. But of course, leave a like on this video if you liked it and learned anything. And of course, of course, let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Do you agree or disagree? Put your 53-man roster predictions in the comment section. Again, I'm gonna do my best to try to read and reply to everybody while I can. I've just been very busy. And so, man, make sure you let me know what you agree or disagree with as far as my picks. And again, even if you just want to put your entire 53-man roster prediction in the comment section, please do that. I want to see debates. I want to see healthy debates. I want to see productive, constructive debates, but I want to see some debates. I want to see people disagreeing and stuff like that and proving their points as to why they chose this player over another player and things like that. I'm really excited. Without further ado, I'm going to catch y'all later. I'm out.